3:12 a.m. Dubai Marina. The water is black as ink, lapping against the hulls of million-dollar yachts like a secret being whispered over and over. The air smells of salt, diesel fuel, and something else. Something organic and wrong that the night breeze can't quite carry away. A police diver surfaces, gasping, his gloved hand clutching the soaked hem of a designer dress. Ivory silk, now stained with salt and something darker. The fabric clings to his fingers like it's trying to pull him under too. His partner surfaces beside him, shaking water from his mask. "Got something else," he says, voice muffled. In the woman's clenched fist. A crumpled note, the ink blurred but the words unmistakable, written in careful English on hotel stationery that costs more than the diver's monthly rent. "I betrayed my sister, the only person who ever loved me. I don't deserve to live. Forgive me, Len." The voiceover cuts through the silence like a scalpel. She was supposed to be on her honeymoon. Instead, she drowned alone, holding a note that blamed only one person, her sister. A pause. The hum of distant traffic from Sheikh Zayed Road. The flicker of neon from the marina skyline reflecting in the water like broken promises. Somewhere in the distance, the call to prayer begins. A reminder that in Dubai, even tragedy operates on a schedule. This is the story of two Filipina sisters, a billionaire's lie, and a revenge so cold, it left no fingerprints. Welcome to Crime V, where the truth doesn't just hide behind gilded gates. It drowns in them. If you're new here, hit subscribe, because what you're about to hear isn't just a crime. It's a reckoning. And in Dubai, even love has a price. Elena Len Abelana wasn't born into marble floors or private jets. She was born in a one-room apartment in Cebu City on the third floor of a building with no elevator, where the ceiling leaked during typhoons, and her mother, Lourdes, came home every night with bleach embedded under her fingernails and blisters on her hands from scrubbing hotel bathtubs in Makati for tourists who never learned her name. The apartment measured exactly 280 square feet. Len knew because she'd measured it herself at age 7, using a ruler and notebook, trying to understand why their entire life could fit in a space smaller than the hotel bathrooms her mother cleaned. The walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors arguing, cooking, making love. Every intimate sound a reminder that privacy was a luxury they couldn't afford. Len learned early that dignity wasn't given, it was earned, stitch by stitch, shift by shift, sacrifice by sacrifice. She watched her mother wake at 4 a.m. every morning, iron her cleaning uniform in the dark so as not to wake the children, and leave with a thermos of rice coffee and a prayer whispered at the small altar of Santo Niño that occupied the only shelf in their kitchen. By 19, she was studying nursing at Cebu Doctors College on a scholarship she'd won by memorizing every bone in the human body backward. A feat that earned her a standing ovation from her anatomy professor and suspicious glances from wealthier classmates who assumed she cheated. She hadn't. She just studied under a single flickering bulb until 3 a.m. every night while her mother snored softly on the mat they shared. By 22, she'd passed the Philippine nursing licensure exam on her first try with a score of 87.3%, a feat celebrated with a single boiled egg split between her and her mother, and a prayer of thanksgiving at Santo Niño Church where they lit a candle that cost 5 pesos. Money they couldn't spare but offered anyway because gratitude required sacrifice. And by 25, with her mother's medical bills piling higher than the laundry baskets she used to fold in childhood, diabetes medication at 3,200 pesos per month, doctor visits at 800 pesos each, blood tests they could barely afford, Len made the decision that would change everything. She signed a 2-year contract with a Dubai-based recruitment agency, paid the 45,000 peso placement fee with borrowed money, and boarded a plane with one suitcase, a rosary wrapped around her wrist, and a photo of her mother taped inside her passport so immigration officers would see she had something to come back to. Dubai didn't welcome her, tested her. Her first job, night shift caregiver for an elderly Emirati matriarch in Jumeirah who refused to speak English and called her Kadima, servant. Even after Len saved her from a choking episode using the Heimlich maneuver she'd practiced on a mannequin back in Cebu. The woman's family gave her a 100 dirham tip and reminded her that good help knows when to be invisible. But Len endured. She learned medical Arabic from YouTube videos watched on her phone during her 15-minute lunch breaks, hospital pamphlets she collected from waiting rooms, and a tattered phrasebook she found in a second-hand shop in Dara. She memorized Quranic verses to calm anxious patients, learned to brew Arabic coffee the traditional way with cardamom and saffron, and discovered that in Dubai, competence was expected but warmth was considered unprofessional. She worked 16-hour days without complaint, sleeping in a shared room with 3 other Filipina nurses who rotated through beds based on shift schedules. She sent 80% of her salary home each month, exactly 83,600 out of E4,500, always with a handwritten note tucked into the Western Union envelope. "Mama, buy medicine. Don't work so hard. I'm fine." She never mentioned that fine meant eating instant noodles for 2 meals a day, that her feet bled from standing on marble floors, or that she cried silently in the shower so her roommates wouldn't hear. Then came Zaid al-Harbi, 9 years old, cerebral palsy, grade 5 spastic quadriplegia, nonverbal, eyes like dark pools of unspoken poetry, framed by lashes so long they seemed cruel on a child who couldn't blink away his own tears. When Len was assigned to his care 5 years ago by an agency that specialized in complex pediatric cases, the doctors had delivered their prognosis with clinical detachment. He'd never walk independently, never speak in full sentences, never make sustained eye contact, never live past adolescence. But Len saw what no one else did. A boy who flinched at loud noises but smiled, really smiled, at the sound of Tagalog lullabies. A child who couldn't hold a spoon but could grip her finger with surprising strength when he was scared. His small hand wrapping around hers like an anchor in a storm he couldn't name. She stayed. Night after night, she massaged his stiff limbs with coconut oil warmed between her palms, coaxed sounds from his throat by mimicking his breathing patterns, taught him to tap a rhythm on a drum when words failed. 1 tap for yes, 2 for no, 3 for mama's here. She researched hydrotherapy protocols, adaptive equipment catalogs, neural stimulation techniques, anything to give him a chance at a life beyond the medical predictions. And slowly, miraculously, Zaid began to respond. A nod at 6 months, a hum at 8, a single syllable at 14 months, "Ma," that made Len weep into her pillow that night because it was the first time anyone in Dubai had called her something other than nurse or help. Faisal al-Harbi noticed. Not because he was a loving father. Those who knew him would say he hadn't smiled since his wife, Layla, died in a London hospital 5 years prior from complications during a routine surgery that was supposed to be completely safe. But because Zaid's progress was the only thing standing between him and total disinheritance. You see, Faisal wasn't just an oil heir. He was a man trapped in a gilded cage of his own making, constructed by legal clauses and family expectations that weighed heavier than gold. His late wife's family trust, established by her grandfather, Salem Al-Mazrouei, a founding partner of ADNOC and one of the architects of modern UAE oil policy, stipulated in ironclad legal language that Faisal could only access the full $120 million endowment if he maintained a stable, married household with demonstrable paternal engagement until Zaid turned 18. The trust's language was specific. The beneficiary must provide evidence of continuous cohabitation, active participation in the child's therapeutic and educational development, and a marital relationship recognized under UAE family law. Dubai Family Court had been watching, and they weren't impressed. 3 citations for parental neglect in 2 years, missed therapy sessions, unanswered school calls, a child who spent more time with hired help than his own father. Faisal's solution? Marriage. Not for love, not for companionship, but for legality. A checkbox on a form that would unlock $120 million. And who better than the woman who already functioned as Zaid's mother in every way that mattered? He proposed on a Tuesday evening, just after sunset prayer. They were in Zaid's therapy room, a converted guest suite with padded floors, sensory equipment, and walls painted the pale blue that supposedly calmed overstimulated nervous systems. Where Len had just helped the boy take 3 unassisted steps using a rolling walker, a milestone that brought tears to her eyes because she'd been working toward it for 11 months. Faisal stood in the doorway, hands clasped behind his back, wearing a white kandura so perfectly pressed it looked like it had never been worn, his voice smooth as polished onyx. "You're the only one who truly sees Zaid," he said, his Arabic accent softening the words. Not as a burden, not as a liability, but as a son. Marry me, Len. Let's give him a real family. Len's breath caught. Not because she believed in fairy tales. She'd long since buried those beneath the weight of reality. But because for the first time since leaving Cebu, she saw a path to her dream. Legal adoption. A passport with Zaid's name beside hers. A future where she could take him back to the Philippines and open a therapy center for children like him. Where love wasn't a luxury but a right. Where children with disabilities weren't hidden away but celebrated. She said yes. The wedding was held 10 days later at a secluded villa on the Palm Jumeirah. Modest by Emirati standards, but opulent by any measure Len had ever known. White orchids imported from Thailand at AD 18,000. Crystal chandeliers that refracted light like frozen waterfalls. A string quartet playing soft Arabic melodies mixed with instrumental versions of Tagalog love songs. A detail Faisal's wedding planner had added for authenticity, never realizing Len had requested them as a private message to her mother, watching via shaky video call from Cebu. But there were no relatives from the Philippines in person. No cousins, no aunts, no childhood friends who'd promised to visit someday. Len couldn't afford the tickets. Round-trip Manila to Dubai was $82,400 per person, and she was still paying off the recruitment agency debt. And Faisal, ever practical, saw no reason to fund sentimental guests who add no strategic value to the optics. The only family present was her younger sister, Rina, 22 years old, fresh off the plane from Manila 2 days earlier. Wide-eyed, nervous, clutching a worn suitcase held together with duct tape and a letter of employment as a kitchen helper in the Al-Harbi household. Sponsored, of course, by Len, who'd negotiated her sister's visa as part of the marriage arrangement. Family is important, she'd told Faisal. I need someone from home. It was Rina's first time abroad. Her first passport stamp. Her first taste of freedom beyond the narrow streets of their Cebu neighborhood. And her first step into a web she didn't yet understand. Len hugged her tightly at the ceremony, whispering in Tagalog so the guests wouldn't understand. We'll take care of each other here. 8. Just like Mama taught us. Blood first, always. Rina smiled, squeezing back, but her eyes darted toward Faisal. Tall, commanding, draped in wealth like a second skin. His kandura gleaming white against the backdrop of the Gulf. That night, after the last guest left and the staff began clearing champagne flutes and dismantling the floral arrangements, Len slipped away to the villa's security room. She always did this, old habits from her nursing days, checking monitors before bed. Zaid had night terrors. She needed to see his breathing pattern, ensure his oxygen levels were stable, confirm the night nurse was alert. But as she scrolled through the camera logs, her fingers slipped on the touchscreen, greasy from the coconut oil she'd used earlier on Zaid's legs. Instead of Zaid's room, the screen flickered to camera 7, Bridal Suite. Timestamp: 11:48 p.m. 43 minutes after she'd said goodnight to her new husband, claiming exhaustion. There they were. Faisal, still in his tuxedo jacket, unbuttoning Rina's blouse with practiced ease. Rina, half laughing, half nervous. Her back pressed against the silk-draped headboard that Len had selected from a catalog 2 weeks ago. She's so trusting, Rina giggled, glancing toward the door as if Len might walk in. She actually thinks this marriage is real. Honestly, she's too naive to suspect anything. Still talks like she's from the province. Faisal smirked, brushing a strand of hair from Rina's face with an intimacy that made Len's stomach turn. Good. Once the court confirms custody next month, I'll send her back to the Philippines with a severance and an NDA. You, on the other hand, you'll stay. You're younger, more adaptable, and you don't have that provincial sentimentality. Len didn't move, didn't breathe. Her knuckles whitened around the edge of the desk. Her vision blurred, not with tears, but with a clarity so sharp it cut through every illusion she'd carefully constructed. In that instant, the dream shattered. The proposal, the wedding, the promise of adoption, the lullabies she'd sung while planning a future with Zaid. All of it a performance, a transaction, a legal maneuver, and she was the prop, her sister the accomplice, her husband the architect. In that instant, Len didn't see a husband or a sister. She saw two obstacles. And in Dubai, obstacles don't negotiate. They disappear. The Palm Jumeirah villa wasn't just a home. It was a fortress of curated perfection. A monument to wealth so excessive it felt almost violent. 20,000 square feet of imported Italian marble, Calacatta gold, quarried from the Apuan Alps and shipped at a cost of $83,800 per square meter. Ceilings so high they swallowed sound, creating an acoustic emptiness that made even laughter feel like an intrusion. Gold-plated faucets in every bathroom that gleamed like trophies, each one engraved with the Al Harbi family crest. Chandeliers dripped from the ceilings like frozen constellations, their crystals imported from Bohemia and assembled by a specialist who'd flown in from Prague for 2 weeks just to install them. There were 7 bedrooms, each larger than Len's childhood apartment in Cebu. A private cinema with reclining leather seats and a projection system worth more than most Filipino workers earned in 5 years. A saltwater infinity pool that overlooked the Arabian Gulf, its water maintained at exactly 28 degrees Celsius year-round, chemical balanced daily by a pool technician who arrived at 6 a.m. and left without speaking to anyone. The staff wing housed 30 domestic workers, cooks, cleaners, gardeners, drivers, nannies, laundry specialists, and security guards, each moving through the compound like silent ghosts, trained never to make eye contact with the master unless spoken to, never to speak their native languages in public spaces, never to exist beyond their function. And in the heart of it all lived Elena Len Abelana, technically the lady of the house, legally the wife, but in truth, just another kind of ghost. Her room, assigned to her after the wedding, was undeniably luxurious by any objective measure. Silk drapes in deep emerald that cost AD 12,000 to custom make. A king-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets that had a thread count she couldn't even comprehend. A walk-in closet larger than her childhood home in Cebu, with built-in lighting and cedar-lined drawers that released a subtle fragrance every time she opened them. But every night at 10 p.m., without fail, the electronic lock on her door clicked shut from the outside. The sound was soft, barely audible over the central air conditioning, but unmistakable. A mechanical whisper that said, "You are contained." "For your safety," Faisal had said on their first night as husband and wife, his hand resting on her shoulder with what might have looked like affection to anyone watching. Dubai can be unpredictable. Better to be cautious. The system is automated, unlocks at 6 a.m. You won't even notice. Len had nodded politely, her nursing training allowing her to maintain a neutral expression even as her chest tightened. But she knew the truth. She wasn't being protected. She was being contained, monitored, controlled. The lock wasn't for her safety. It was for his peace of mind. A guarantee that his legal wife wouldn't wander, wouldn't question, wouldn't discover anything she wasn't meant to see. This was the unspoken rule of the Al Harbi household. Appearance was everything. And Len's role wasn't to be loved. It was to be seen. To stand beside Faisal at charity galas hosted at the Burj Al Arab, wearing modest designer gowns selected by his assistant, smiling for family court evaluators who arrived unannounced to document the stable home environment. She was required to whisper sweet nothings to Zaid on camera while Faisal filmed it for his legal team, her voice dubbed over with classical music to create highlight reels titled Family Moments that would be submitted as evidence of his demonstrable paternal engagement. She was a prop in a performance designed to convince Dubai's elite and its courts that this marriage was real, that this family was functional, that the $120 million trust fund was being protected by a man who honored his deceased wife's memory by creating a stable household. Outside the villa walls, the suffocation deepened. In public, Len was required to wear an abaya, not because she was Muslim, but because Faisal's conservative relatives, who still wielded influence over the family trust board, demanded it. "It shows respect for our culture," he told her gently, as if it were a favor, as if he were protecting her from judgment rather than erasing her identity. "You understand, don't you? It's temporary. Just until the custody is finalized." The abaya was black, heavy, made from a fabric that trapped heat and made her sweat even in air-conditioned malls. Beneath it, she was allowed to wear whatever she wanted, But what was the point when no one would ever see it? She wasn't allowed to speak Tagalog with the other Filipina staff, not even a simple kamusta ka? In passing, because, according to Faisal, it created division among the household workers. We're all one family here, he'd announced at a staff meeting. English or Arabic only, preferably Arabic. It's more professional. Len watched the other Filipina women's faces fall. They'd lost their language, the one thing that connected them to home. And Len, their supposed advocate as the lady of the house, had said nothing, because saying something would mean losing Zaid. She'd watch other expat wives stroll through Dubai Mall in jeans and crop tops, laughing freely, holding their husbands' hands, stopping for coffee at overpriced cafes where they complain about traffic and vacation plans. They look so light, so unburdened, so free. Len would walk 10 paces behind Faisal, eyes down, voice muted, her identity slowly sandblasted away by the desert wind of expectation. She carried his phone charger in her purse. She held his sunglasses when he went indoors. She smiled when introduced to his business associates as my wife, the nurse, very devoted to Zaid. She was never Len. She was never Elena Abelana, nursing graduate, top of her class. She was the nurse. And later, after they'd walked away, she'd overhear them, Filipino, right? He married the help. Smart move for the court case. But the cruelest twist wasn't the silence or the dress code or the locked bedroom door. It was Rina. Her younger sister had arrived in Dubai wide-eyed and trembling, stepping off Emirates Flight 354 clutching a suitcase full of second-hand clothes and a notebook filled with Tagalog to English phrases she'd practiced on the plane. Good morning, sir. Yes, ma'am. I will work hard. She'd looked so small in the arrivals terminal, so overwhelmed by the towering ceilings and the rush of wealthy travelers who moved through the airport like they owned the very air. I want to make you proud, 8. She'd whispered at baggage claim, tears in her eyes, gripping Len's hand. I'll work hard. I won't embarrass you. I promise. For the first week, Rina was exactly that, shy, diligent, grateful. She scrubbed pots in the kitchen until her hands cracked and bled, refusing the hand cream Len offered because pain is part of earning your keep. She folded linens with military precision, corners sharp enough to cut. She bowed her head when Faisal passed by, murmuring good evening, sir, in accented English. But then, something shifted. It started with small things Len almost didn't notice at first. A new phone, not the basic Nokia Len had given her, but an iPhone 15 Pro with a rose gold case. A gift from the master for excellent service, Rina had said casually, scrolling through Instagram without looking up. Then designer slippers, Gucci with the signature B emblem. Found them in the staff allocation closet, Rina claimed, though Len knew for a fact that closet contained only standard-issue black flats. Then private dinners in the formal staff dining room, not the regular cafeteria where workers ate standing up between shifts, but the mahogany table room where senior staff occasionally met with Faisal to discuss household operations. Except these dinners were just Rina and Faisal, and closed doors. At first, Len assumed it was routine employer appreciation, the kind of mentorship wealthy households sometimes offered to promising young workers. Faisal had done it before with a Sri Lankan driver who'd shown initiative, sponsoring his brother's visa and promoting him to head of security. But the glances grew longer, the laughter too intimate, the way Rina began wearing her hair loose instead of in the tight bun required by household protocol. Long black waves that caught the light, that she'd flip over her shoulder when Faisal walked by. Her makeup became bolder, lips painted coral instead of neutral, eyes lined with kohl that made her look older, more sophisticated. Her posture shifted from subservient to something else. Confident, almost flirtatious, the way she'd lean against doorframes when speaking to him, the way she'd laugh at his jokes that weren't even funny. One afternoon, Len overheard Rina on the villa's back terrace, speaking in hushed English to Indy, another Filipina maid who cleaned the guest suites. The terrace doors were open, and Len had been passing through the hall to check on Zaid. Honestly, she still thinks he loves her, Rina said, voice dripping with condescension that made Len's blood run cold. It's pathetic. She talks like she's fresh off the boat from some province. Uses words like 8 And like we're still in Cebu. No wonder he married her just for the court. She's too naive to even realize she's being used. Indy had laughed nervously, clearly uncomfortable but too afraid to contradict the master's apparent favorite. Len froze behind the potted olive tree, her chest tightening like a vice. Her hands, which had been carrying Zaid's medication tray, began to shake so hard the pills rattled in their bottles. That night, she found a text on Rena's unlocked phone, left carelessly on the kitchen counter while she fetched tea for what she'd called a late meeting with the master. Faisal, you handled her well today. Keep her focused on Zaid. Distracted. Rena, she still thinks you love her. It's pathetic. Faisal, good. Keep playing the devoted little sister. Custody hearing is next month. After that, we'll discuss your promotion. Rena, I'm looking forward to it, sir. To many things. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was strategic, calculated, cold. A conspiracy written in text messages and sealed with casual cruelty. Yet amid the gilded cage and the sister's betrayal, there was one truth Len could still hold onto Zaid. 9 years old, nonverbal cerebral palsy, spastic quadriplegia, eyes that held galaxies of unspoken feeling, framed by lashes so long they seemed wasted on a child who couldn't blink away his own tears. In the privacy of his therapy room, far from cameras and court-appointed observers who arrived with clipboards and cold smiles, Zaid called her Mama. Not Len. Not nurse. Not the help. Mama. It had started as a whisper during a seizure episode 6 months after she'd been hired. Len had held him through the tremors, his small body rigid and shaking, humming a Tagalog lullaby her own mother used to sing when Len was sick with dengue fever at age 8. Oyayay, tulog naong bata. And when the shaking stopped, when his breathing steadied and his eyes focused again, Zaid had looked at her, blinked slowly with those impossible lashes, and said it soft, broken, but unmistakable. Ma. From that day on, it became their secret language. In the mornings, before the therapists arrived, she'd teach him to tap rhythms on a drum. 1 tap for yes, 2 for no, 3 for mama's here. In the evenings, after his bath, she'd sign simple words in Filipino sign language she'd learned from YouTube, mixing it with the standard ASL the speech therapist taught, creating a hybrid language that was theirs alone. He couldn't walk without support, but he could grip her finger like an anchor. He couldn't speak in full sentences, but he could laugh. A sound so rare, so pure, that even Faisal would pause in the doorway when he heard it, stunned into silence by proof that his son was still human, still capable of joy. Faisal tolerated it. Not out of love, he was incapable of that, but out of utility. Every milestone Zaid reached, every syllable spoken, every step taken with assistance, was documented, time-stamped, and submitted to the Dubai family court as proof of a stable, nurturing home environment. Len's bond with Zaid wasn't affection to Faisal. It was evidence, a legal asset, a means to an end. And then came the ultimatum. It arrived on a Tuesday, wrapped in the guise of routine paperwork. Faisal summoned her to his study after breakfast, where he sat behind a desk of black onyx that had cost 85,000, fingers steepled, expression unreadable behind gold-rimmed glasses he wore only when he wanted to look intellectual. I've had the lawyers update our prenuptial agreement, he said smoothly, sliding a folder across the desk. The folder was leather-bound, expensive, embossed with a legal firm's logo in gold foil. Standard procedure before the custody finalization. Just formalities. Len opened it with hands that had bathed Zaid that morning, that had fed him breakfast spoon by spoon, that had wiped drool from his chin with the gentleness of someone who actually loved him. Her blood turned to ice. It wasn't a prenup. It was a divorce decree, already drafted, already signed by Faisal's legal team, awaiting only her signature to become binding. She would leave Dubai within 30 days of the custody hearing. She would never contact Zaid again, directly or indirectly, in person or via any communication medium. She would sign a non-disclosure agreement forbidding her from speaking about the marriage, the household, Zaid's condition, or Faisal's parenting to any media, legal entity, or private individual. In exchange, She would receive 500,000 US dollars, a fraction of what she'd be entitled to as a legal spouse under UAE law, but enough to start fresh somewhere quiet. If you refuse, Faisal said, his voice dropping to a venomous calm that made the air-conditioned room feel suddenly cold, I'll file a formal complaint with the Dubai Health Authority. I'll testify that you emotionally manipulated my son, used Filipino superstitions, psychological coercion, and inappropriate bonding techniques to create a false maternal attachment that interferes with his relationship with his biological family. He leaned forward, and Len could smell his cologne. Oud and amber, expensive and suffocating. Your nursing license? Revoked globally. Your reputation? Destroyed. Every hospital, every agency, every family that Googles your name will see the DHA report. And you'll be deported in chains, banned from re-entry for life. He smiled, thin, cold, victorious. Choose wisely, Elena. You came here with nothing. Don't leave with less. That night, Len sat on the edge of her electronically locked bed and took inventory of her life. Her passport, held in Faisal's safe, for safekeeping, he'd claimed on their wedding night, as if it were normal for husbands to confiscate their wives' documents. Her salary, paid in cash, untraceable, never deposited into any bank account she could access without his approval. She'd been sending it home via remittance services, leaving her with no financial trail, no proof of income, nothing a lawyer could use. Her allies? None. The staff feared Faisal too much to speak. The other nurses in the Filipino community knew better than to get involved in employer disputes. Her family was 4,000 miles away, unreachable by anything except phone calls she couldn't afford. And Rina? Rina was in his bed. She had no legal standing, no financial trail, no witnesses, no evidence, just a wedding ring that felt like a shackle and a boy who called her mama. In that moment, a terrifying clarity settled over her like a shroud. In Dubai, a Filipino wife is just a temporary visa with a heartbeat. Disposable, replaceable, erasable. But then she thought of Zaid's hand in hers. The way he smiled when she sang. The way he fought, every single day, just to exist in a body that betrayed him at every turn. And she remembered something else. She wasn't just a wife. She wasn't just a victim. She was a nurse. For 5 years, she'd kept a child alive against all odds, monitoring vitals, adjusting medications, anticipating seizures before they struck, calculating doses down to the milligram. She knew how the human body failed, how quietly a heart could stop with the right pressure on the carotid, how easily a fall could look like an accident if the angle was right, how a single miscalculated dose could mimic natural causes. Faisal thought he'd cornered her. He didn't realize he'd handed her the one weapon she knew better than anyone, the art of silent death. Because in a city where money erased evidence and power rewrote truth, the most dangerous person wasn't the one with the loudest voice. It was the one who knew how to kill without making a sound. But Len had one advantage Faisal never considered. She knew how to kill quietly. After all, she'd spent years keeping a dying boy alive. Now, she'd used that same precision to end a man. The Maldives were supposed to be their fresh start. At least, that's what the glossy travel brochure said. Its pages filled with photographs of turquoise water and overwater villas that looked more like floating dreams than actual architecture. A private island sanctuary where love begins anew. Faisal had booked it all through his personal concierge, a service that cost AD 50,000 annually just for membership, the kind of luxury that normal people didn't even know existed. A 10-day stay at Villa Private Island, a secluded overwater villa on a private atoll in the Nunu Atoll region, accessible only by seaplane or private yacht. The package included a personal chef trained in molecular gastronomy, a sunset Doni cruise with champagne service, and a romantic couples massage package featuring oils infused with gold leaf. The itinerary was posted on his Instagram, just one photo, carefully curated by his social media manager. Len in a white linen dress, standing barefoot on the villa's teak deck, gazing at the turquoise water with an expression that could be mistaken for peace. Faisal's hand resting gently on her shoulder in a gesture that screamed, "Loving husband." The caption read, "New chapter, new family, forever blessed." Hashtag Maldives love, hashtag family first, hashtag grateful. The Dubai Family Court evaluator had liked the post within 3 minutes. So had half of Faisal's board of directors. The comments section filled with congratulations and heart emojis from people who'd never met either of them, but felt entitled to witness their happiness. But Len knew the truth. This wasn't a honeymoon. It was a performance. A final photo opportunity before she was erased from his life completely. And she was about to rewrite the script. In the days leading up to their departure, Len played her role flawlessly, like an actress who'd memorized not just her lines but every gesture, every pause, every facial expression. She packed Faisal's favorite cashmere sweaters, the navy ones from Brunello Cucinelli that cost AED 8,000 each. She arranged Zaid's therapy schedule for the 10 days she'd be gone, typing out detailed instructions for the substitute nurse with the kind of precision that made Faisal comment, "You're so thorough. He's lucky to have you." She even baked his favorite bibingka, a Filipino rice cake made with coconut milk and topped with salted egg, using a recipe she'd memorized from her mother, staying up until 2 a.m. to get it right. "To make you feel loved before the trip," she'd said, serving it to him warm with his morning coffee. Faisal, ever the strategist, saw only compliance. He saw a woman who'd accepted her fate, who was grateful for the $500,000 severance, who understood her place. He didn't notice the way her eyes lingered on his tablet when he left it charging beside Zaid's bed during therapy sessions. He didn't realize she'd memorized his password years ago, Zaid's birthday, September 14, 2014, because she'd entered it 100 times during medical emergencies, pulling up insurance information and medication histories when the boy was seizing and Faisal was unreachable on a golf course in Abu Dhabi. What he didn't know was that Len had spent the past 3 nights studying flight paths on aviation tracking websites, maritime laws in the Maldives legal database, and island jurisdictions using VPN-protected searches that left no trace on the villa's Wi-Fi network. She'd read about Fuvamula, a remote southern atoll in the Maldives, 300 kilometers from Malé, far from tourist routes and luxury resorts, an island with no international embassy, no extradition treaty with the UAE, and a local police force consisting of 8 officers who rarely investigated accidental drownings involving foreigners because tourism was the only industry and scandals hurt business. It was the perfect place to disappear. And not just for her. The private jet lifted off from Dubai International Airport at 6:17 a.m., the engine's roar swallowed by the hum of luxury that insulated passengers from the reality of flight. Zaid stood on the tarmac with his therapist, his small hand waving a Filipino flag Len had sewn for him from fabric scraps, the red and blue colors bright against the gray concrete. He couldn't speak the words, but his eyes said everything. "Come back, Mama." Len pressed her palm to the window in silent promise, her fingerprints leaving marks on the glass that a flight attendant would wipe away within minutes. Inside the cabin, Faisal sipped espresso from a porcelain cup and scrolled through emails on his phone, already mentally checked out of the marriage he was about to dissolve. "The court hearing is scheduled for May 12th, he said casually, as if reminding her of a dentist appointment. "Once custody is finalized, we'll discuss your transition plan. I'm thinking a quiet departure. No drama, just gratitude." Len nodded, stirring honey into her tea with a silver spoon that probably cost more than she'd earned in her first month in Dubai. "Of course, I understand." She didn't mention that May 12th would never come. Mid-flight, while Faisal dozed in his leather recliner seat with noise-canceling headphones and a cashmere eye mask, Len excused herself to the lavatory. But instead of returning to her seat, she slipped into the cockpit, credentials in hand, her heart hammering but her face perfectly calm. She'd forged a temporary flight authorization using Faisal's corporate letterhead, which she'd photographed and edited on her phone using a design app, then printed at a 24-hour shop in Dera run by a Pakistani man who didn't ask questions if you paid cash. The pilot, a hired contractor with no loyalty to the Al-Harbi name, just a paycheck and a schedule, glanced at the document, then at the phone Len held up showing a wire transfer confirmation for $50,000 to an account in his name. The money was real. She'd wired it from an offshore account she'd opened 2 years ago, slowly funneling cash through a Filipino remittance service that didn't report transfers under $10,000. The pilot's eyes widened. He looked at Len, this small, quiet Filipina woman in a modest dress, and saw someone who just offered him more than he'd make in 6 months. He didn't ask questions. New destination? He muttered, already pulling up navigational charts. Fuvamula, Len said, her voice steady. Tell air traffic control it's a medical emergency. Say Zaid had a relapse. We need to land near a hospital. The lie was flawless. Faisal had used Zaid's medical condition as leverage for years. Missed meetings because of seizures. Delayed court dates because of therapy appointments. The world had bent around Zaid's disability. Now, Len weaponized it one last time. They touched down on a dusty airstrip surrounded by palm trees and silence at 11:23 a.m. local time. No paparazzi. No luxury yachts bobbing in a marina. No staff waiting with chilled towels and welcome drinks. Just heat. Oppressive, humid, suffocating heat. And sand and the distant cry of seabirds circling overhead. Faisal woke confused, blinking against the harsh sunlight streaming through the jet's windows. This isn't Vila, he said, frowning at the GPS on his phone, which showed their location as Fuvamula Atoll. Where the hell are we? Fuvamula? Len replied calmly, her voice betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The pilot said there was a fuel issue. Something about crosswinds and safety protocols. We'll stay one night at a local guest house, then charter a boat to the resort tomorrow. It's only a few hours by ferry. Faisal grumbled but didn't argue. He was too exhausted from his early morning, too confident in his control over every situation, too certain that even mechanical failures would bend to his will. He still believed he was the one holding the strings. He checked his phone, no service. The island cell tower was down for maintenance, a detail Len had confirmed before diverting the flight. Fine, he muttered, but I'm filing a complaint with the charter company. Len nodded sympathetically. Of course, they should compensate us. That evening, as the sun bled gold and crimson into the Indian Ocean, painting the sky in colors that would have been beautiful if they weren't so final, Len suggested a swim. It's so peaceful here, she said, slipping into a simple black one-piece swimsuit she'd packed specifically for this moment. Just us. No cameras. No court reports. No lawyers. No lies. Just us. Like you promised on our wedding day. Faisal hesitated. He'd always been wary of open water. A fear rooted in childhood that he'd never shared with anyone except the therapist he'd seen once in university. But then he smiled. This was the woman he remembered. Soft, obedient, nostalgic for intimacy. Maybe she'd accepted her fate. Maybe this trip could still be pleasant before he ended it all. He followed her into the water, unaware that every step he took was deeper into her trap. The ocean was warm, the current deceptively gentle, the water so clear you could see the sandy bottom sloping away into darkness. They floated side by side 30 meters from shore, the only sound the lap of waves and the distant hum of a fishing boat returning to harbor. Then Len spoke. Do you remember what you told Rena on our wedding night? Faisal froze mid-stroke. What? You said, once custody is confirmed, she's gone. You stay. She's too naive to suspect anything. His face paled, water droplets running down his cheeks like tears he'd never cry. Len, you thought I was naive, she continued, her voice steady as a scalpel making an incision. But I've spent 5 years watching you, Faisal. Your habits, your fears, your secrets. I know things you've never told anyone. She turned to face him, treading water with the ease of someone who'd grown up swimming in Cebu's rivers. Did you know you have a documented panic response in deep water? It's in your medical file from American Hospital Dubai. The one you filled out when you thought you were having a heart attack last year. You nearly drowned as a child in Abu Dhabi when your older brother pushed you off a dock as a joke. You never told anyone, not even your first wife. But you told your cardiologist. Faisal's breath quickened, his strokes becoming erratic. Stay away from me. But it was too late. With one swift motion, Len reached for the hidden clasp on his inflatable life vest, the one she'd loosened while he showered that afternoon, carefully manipulating the valve so it would hold just enough air to seem functional but would fail under pressure. She yanked it open, The vest deflated instantly with a hiss of escaping air. Faisal gasped, flailing as his body sank beneath the surface. "Len, help me. I can't." She watched, not with rage, not with tears, not with joy, with precision. She knew exactly how long it would take. She'd calculated it the way she calculated medication doses. Body weight, lung capacity, water temperature, psychological state. The human body can hold its breath for 30 seconds on average. Panic sets in by 45 seconds when the diaphragm begins to spasm. Unconsciousness by 90 seconds as oxygen deprivation affects the brain. Clinical death by 3 minutes when brain cells begin to die. Faisal thrashed, calling her name, his eyes wide with terror as he realized what was happening. But the current pulled him farther from shore with each desperate movement. His arms grew heavy, his mouth filled with salt water. His expensive swim trunks dragged him down. And Len? She swam back to the beach with smooth, efficient strokes. Sat on the sand, her back against a palm tree, and waited. She counted in her head, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, all the way to 180. When the local authorities arrived, 2 officers on a rusted motorbike that sputtered and coughed. They found a distraught widow sobbing on the shore, her wet hair plastered to her face, clutching her husband's wedding ring that she'd slipped off his finger in those final moments, holding it up like proof of love. "He slipped on the coral," she whispered, her voice raw from manufactured screaming. "He couldn't swim. I tried. God help me. I tried to reach him, but the current, it was too strong." The officers exchanged glances. Foreigners drowned here all the time, 2, maybe 3 times a year. Rich ones, especially. They came seeking paradise and found only water that didn't care about money or status. They never checked the life vest. Never questioned why a man afraid of deep water would swim so far from shore. Never asked why the widow had been able to swim back but her husband had not. By dawn, after a cursory investigation that consisted mainly of filling out forms in triplicate, Faisal al-Harbi was declared dead by accidental drowning due to strong current and possible cardiac event. His body was cremated under Islamic rites within 24 hours. Len insisted, citing his faith and his often stated wish not to burden anyone with my remains. The ashes were sealed in a silver urn engraved with Quranic verses she'd selected from a catalog the funeral director provided. No autopsy, no investigation beyond the paperwork, no toxicology screen, just a death certificate and a widow's tears. Back in Palm Jumeirah, the narrative shifted overnight like sand in a desert storm. Dubai media painted Len as the grieving hero, devoted wife, surrogate mother, selfless caregiver who'd lost the love of her life in a tragic accident during what should have been their romantic honeymoon. The family court, moved by her poise during testimony and Zaid's visible distress at losing the only father figure who truly engaged with him, fast-tracked the custody transfer. Within 10 days, Len was granted full legal guardianship of Zaid, and with it, control of the $120 million trust tied to his welfare and medical care. Faisal's will, drafted years earlier during a moment of rare vulnerability after Zaid's worst seizure, named her as Zaid's primary guardian should anything happen to me, as she is the only person who truly understands his needs. He'd never imagined she'd be the one to make that clause necessary. At the memorial service held at Jumeirah Mosque, attended by 300 people who'd barely known Faisal but showed up for the networking opportunities, Rina stood in the back row, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, wearing a black dress that was too expensive for a kitchen helper's salary. She hadn't believed the drowning story for a second. And she had proof. 3 nights later, she cornered Len in the villa's kitchen at 11:47 p.m., when the rest of the staff had gone to sleep and Zaid was sedated for the night. "I saw the flight logs," Rina hissed, phone in hand, screen glowing with screenshots. "You changed the destination mid-air. There's no hospital on Fuvamula. No fuel emergency. The pilot was paid $50,000 from an account in your name. You planned this." Len didn't flinch. She continued washing dishes by hand, the warm water running over her fingers, the soap bubbles catching the light. "You're grieving 8. Grief makes people imagine things." "Don't call me that," Rina snapped. "You're not my sister anymore." You're a murderer, and I have proof that will put you in prison for life. A beat of silence. The drip of the faucet. The hum of the refrigerator. Then, softly, "How much do you want?" Rena's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Half. $60 million. Or I go to the police with the flight records, the medical file you stole from his doctor, the pilot's testimony, and the fact that you've been stockpiling ketamine from Zaid's supply for months." Len smiled. A sad, tired smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, 8. Family comes first. That's what Mama always taught us." She reached out, touched Rena's cheek with a wet hand, leaving a trace of dish soap that smelled like lemon. "Meet me at the Dubai Marina Yacht Club tomorrow night, 8 p.m. We'll talk, just like old times. Just you and me." Rena nodded, satisfied, already mentally spending the money. She didn't see the storm behind Len's eyes. She didn't know that in Len's world, betrayal wasn't forgiven. It was erased. That night, Len sat in Zaid's room, watching him sleep, his chest rising and falling with the rhythm she'd memorized over 5 years. He stirred, murmured something unintelligible in the language of dreams, then reached for her hand without waking. She held it tightly, her other hand resting on the vial of ketamine she'd tucked into her pocket. Tomorrow she would face her sister, but tonight she was still his mama. And that was the only truth that mattered. The silence after a murder is never empty. It's thick, heavy, full of ghosts that whisper in the spaces between breaths, in the pause between heartbeats, in the moment before sleep when the mind replays what the hands have done. For 3 days after Faisal's body was cremated and his ashes sealed in a silver urn engraved with Quranic verses that neither Len nor the engraver could read, Len moved through the Palm Jumeirah villa like a woman sleepwalking through a dream she couldn't wake from. Her movements were mechanical, precise, the muscle memory of routine carrying her through hours that felt both endless and impossibly compressed. She bathed Zaid at 7 a.m., the water temperature exactly 37 degrees Celsius, testing it with her elbow the way she'd learned in nursing school. She reviewed trust fund documents with lawyers in the study at 10 a.m., signing papers she barely read because her mind was still in the Maldives, watching a man drown while she counted seconds. She accepted condolences from Faisal's business associates at 2 p.m., men in crisp kanduras who offered sympathy with the emotional investment of people ordering coffee, their eyes already calculating how his death would affect their portfolios. She wore black every day, not the mandated abaya, but simple black dresses that could have been mourning or just preference. She kept her hair pulled back. She wore no makeup except the dark circles under her eyes, which were real, because sleep had become something she could only manage in 90-minute increments before her body jolted awake, convinced she was drowning. But through it all, she maintained the mask, the grace, the composure that made people whisper about her strength, her dignity, her devotion. But Rena watched, and Rena knew. It started with a discrepancy in the flight manifest that Rena discovered almost by accident. She had been tasked with organizing Faisal's travel documents for the estate, a menial job meant to keep her busy and out of the way while Len met with Dubai family court officials and lawyers who smelled of expensive cologne and spoke in legal terms Rena couldn't follow. The documents were stored in Faisal's cloud account, the password for which Rena had obtained weeks ago during one of their late-night meetings, when he'd been too drunk on whiskey and ego to notice her watching him type. She'd been scrolling through flight receipts, hotel confirmations, car service bookings, the digital detritus of a wealthy man's life, when something caught her eye. The original destination was Vila Private Island, confirmed and paid for, non-refundable booking at AED 185,000 for 10 days. But the revised flight plan, filed mid-journey and time-stamped at 9:47 a.m. Dubai time, showed a different destination, Fuvahmulah. Rena pulled up Google Maps. Fuvahmulah was nothing, a remote island 300 kilometers south of Malé, population 12,000, no luxury resorts, no medical facilities beyond a small clinic, no reason for a billionaire to land there unless he never intended to leave alive. Her hands trembled as she cross-referenced timestamps. The jet had diverted mid-flight, exactly 2 hours and 14 minutes after takeoff. The pilot had filed a false emergency, medical concern for minor passenger. Except Zaid hadn't been on the plane. It was just Len and Faisal. And Len? Len had been alone with Faisal in the water for over 20 minutes before calling for help. According to the police report she found buried in the estate's legal folder. 20 minutes. Enough time to drown 10 men. That night, Rena dug deeper, her fingers flying across her iPhone screen with the manic energy of someone who just discovered power. She found the forged authorization letter, a PDF in Faisal's documents folder, created on Len's personal laptop based on the file metadata. She found deleted browser history recovered through a cloud backup, searches for drowning time without rescue, ketamine effects, Maldives extradition law. She found encrypted messages between Len and an offshore account in the Seychelles, wire transfers totaling $73,000 over 6 months. Money Len should never have had access to. She didn't have proof that would hold up in court, not yet. But she had enough to destroy Len's carefully constructed narrative. Enough to go to the police with reasonable suspicion. Enough to demand what she deserved for her silence. And more importantly, she had leverage. She confronted Len in the villa's rose garden at dusk, just as the Maghrib call to prayer echoed from a distant mosque, wrapping the moment in sacred silence that made everything feel heavier, more final. The garden was Len's sanctuary, the one place she'd insisted on maintaining personally despite the staff of gardeners. She'd planted Filipino sampaguita flowers along the border, their jasmine-like scent a reminder of home. She was pruning dead leaves when Rena approached, scissors in hand, her movements slow and methodical. "You killed him," Rena said, voice low but sharp as broken glass. No preamble, no softening, just accusation. Len didn't flinch. She plucked a white rose, twirling it between her fingers, watching the petals catch the fading light. "You're grieving, ape. Grief makes people see things that aren't there." "Don't call me that," Rena snapped, stepping closer, her shadow falling across Len's work. "I'm not your sister anymore. I'm your witness." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through screenshots with shaking fingers. "I saw the flight logs, the revised destination, the pilot's payment, $50,000 from an account you opened in the Seychelles. The browser history, the searches about drowning, about medications, about extradition laws." She looked up, eyes blazing with righteous fury and calculated greed. "I want $60 million. Half of what you inherited from the trust. Transfer it to an offshore account I'll send you the details for. Or I go to the police with everything. The flight logs, the medical files you stole, the fact that you've been stockpiling ketamine from Zaid's supply for months." A pause. The rustle of palm fronds. The distant sound of traffic on Sheikh Zayed Road. "And if you think I won't tell Zaid the truth," Rena continued, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper, "that his precious mama pushed his father into the ocean and watched him drown. You don't know me at all. I'll tell him everything, every detail, until he looks at you the way you deserve to be looked at." The threat hung in the air like smoke, acrid and suffocating. Because Len knew, Zaid might not speak clearly, but he understood betrayal. His therapist had said his cognitive function was intact, trapped inside a body that wouldn't cooperate. If he ever looked at her with fear instead of love, if that word mama turned to silence, she'd have nothing left to live for. But Len didn't panic. She'd spent 5 years managing medical emergencies, calculating doses, anticipating seizures. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. She smiled, the same smile she'd given court evaluators, the same smile she'd worn at Faisal's memorial service. "Of course, 8, she said, reaching out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind Rena's ear, just like their mother used to do when they were children in Cebu, sitting on the concrete steps outside their building, counting coins for school lunch. "We're family. Blood is thicker than water. Isn't that what Mama always said?" Rena narrowed her eyes, suspicion warring with greed. "You're not playing me? Why would I?" Len's voice was honey and steel, sweet and sharp simultaneously. "You're all I have left. Faisal is gone. Mama is in Cebu. You're my only family in this country. I need you." And just like that, the war became a performance. Over the next week, Len executed her countermove with surgical precision, the same precision she'd used to adjust medication doses, to time Zaid's seizure interventions, to calculate how long a man could survive without air. She transferred $50,000 to Rena's account on the second day. "A down payment," she said, "to show I'm serious. The lawyers need time to liquidate assets without raising flags." She took Rena shopping at Dubai Mall, spending 3 hours in stores Rena had only ever cleaned, buying her a Gucci handbag AED 8,500, Christian Louboutin heels with red soles that clicked importantly on marble floors, AED 4,200, and a Cartier love bracelet that required a screwdriver to remove, AED 32,000, all gifts from a grateful sister who understands loyalty. She posted photos on Instagram, carefully curated images that told a story of sisterly devotion. The two of them laughing over halwa at Arabian tea house, arms linked in front of the Burj Khalifa at sunset, hugging in matching white dresses at a beach in Jumeirah. The captions were pure performance art. "Through every storm, we stand together. Love you forever 8. Hashtag sister love, hashtag family first. Family isn't just blood, it's loyalty. And mine never wavered. Hashtag blessed, hashtag stronger together." To the outside world scrolling through their feeds, they were healing, reconciling, surviving tragedy as one united front. But in private, Len watched Rena's every move with the attention she'd once reserved for monitoring Zaid's vital signs. She noted how Rena's eyes lingered on Zaid during therapy sessions, not with affection but calculation, as if measuring his value as leverage. How she practiced phrases like, "Mama's secret," in front of the bathroom mirror, her voice taking on a storytelling cadence. How she saved screenshots of Dubai police tip lines on her phone, bookmarked articles about whistleblower protections. Rena wasn't just greedy. She was planning her own escape with Len's money, Zaid's truth, and a one-way ticket back to Manila where extradition was complicated and family connections could be weaponized. Then came the invitation, delivered on a Tuesday evening while Rena was painting her nails in her room. The room that used to be for storage but now had a queen bed, an ensuite bathroom, and a view of the garden. "Let's celebrate," Len said from the doorway, her voice soft and nostalgic. She was stirring tsa Filipino milk tea, in 2 cups, steam rising between them. "You've been so strong for me during this nightmare. I want to take you somewhere special. Just us. Like when we were kids and dreamed about Dubai Marina, remember? We'd see it in magazines and say, someday we'll drink tea there like rich people." Rena's eyes lit up with the same excitement she'd had at 7 years old, planning impossible futures. The yacht club. Yes, private cabana. No staff, no cameras, no lawyers, just us, sisters. The way it should have been from the beginning. Rena agreed instantly, already mentally photographing herself in the Louboutins against the marina backdrop. She didn't notice that Len had reserved Cabana 17, the farthest from the main deck, surrounded by water on 3 sides, accessible only by a narrow wooden pier that swayed with each step, isolated enough that sound didn't carry. She didn't question why Len brought their mother's old tea set, the one with chipped porcelain and faded floral patterns, smuggled from Cebu in Len's suitcase 5 years ago wrapped in her nursing uniforms, the only inheritance they'd received besides debt and prayers. And she didn't suspect that the jasmine tea Len brewed with such care wasn't from the villa's pantry stocked with imported teas from London, but from a sealed vial labeled ketamine 50 milligrams per milliliter for Zaid al-Harbi. Severe spasticity management, stolen from the locked medical cabinet 3 weeks ago and hidden behind loose tiles in Len's bathroom. The Dubai Marina glittered under a full moon as they sat in the cabana at 8:17 p.m. Silk cushions beneath them imported from Thailand. The city skyline shimmering like a mirage built on sand and ambition. Len poured the tea slowly, deliberately, the steam curling into the night air, mixing with the smell of salt water and expensive perfumes from passing yachts. "Remember when you stole my school allowance in grade 6? Len asked, handing Rena a cup, her fingers wrapped around the warm porcelain. "You bought candy for that boy you had a crush on. Marco something. Mama was furious, but I told her I lost it at the market." Rena laughed softly, the sound genuine for the first time in weeks. "You always protected me, even when I didn't deserve it." "I loved you," Len said, eyes glistening in the artificial light, her voice carrying weight that Rena mistook for nostalgia. "Even when you didn't deserve it." Rena's smile faltered. She looked down at her tea, seeing her reflection distorted in the dark liquid. Len, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted security. A life that wasn't scrubbing toilets. Can you understand that? Shoo, Len whispered, placing a hand over hers, feeling her sister's pulse beneath warm skin. Drink. It's just like Mama used to make. Remember? Sunday afternoons after church. She'd make tea and we'd talk about our dreams. Rena lifted the cup to her lips, and in that moment, suspended between guilt and greed, memory and regret, sisterhood and betrayal, she almost told the truth. Almost confessed that sleeping with Faisal had been his idea, that she'd been coerced, that she'd wanted to warn Len but was too afraid. But it was too late. The ketamine was already working. The Dubai Marina at night is a mirage of light and illusion. Yachts bobbing like gilded coffins on black water, neon reflections shimmering like promises that vanish by dawn. It's a place where secrets are buried beneath the hum of diesel engines and the whisper of tide against pier, where the line between elegance and erasure blurs beneath the carefully orchestrated ambience of a city that never stops performing. And on this night, April 23, 2024, at 8:47 p.m., it would become a stage for the final act of a sister's betrayal and a widow's vengeance. Len had chosen Cabana 17 with the same precision she once used to time Zaid's muscle relaxants, calculating onset, duration, and effect with clinical detachment. Secluded, sound dampened by water on three sides. No overhead cameras, only a blind spot in the marina's security grid she'd identified 2 years ago when accompanying Faisal to a business dinner. She'd reserved it under Abelana family celebration. A detail that would be logged, time-stamped, and forgotten because no one questioned Filipinas celebrating at the marina. Inside, she'd arranged everything as their mother would have. The chipped porcelain tea set from Cebu, its floral pattern faded, the teapot handle cracked and reglued 3 times. 2 embroidered napkins stitched by their Lola with arthritic hands. A small plate of kakanin, sticky rice cakes bought from 8 Rosa in Dara for AED 5 each. Cash only. A shrine to a childhood that no longer existed. A trap dressed as a memory. Rena arrived at 8:15 p.m., heels clicking on the wooden pier, wearing the Cartier bracelet Len had gifted her. A 32,000 of 18-karat gold, circling her wrist like a promise. Her hair cascaded in perfected waves. Her makeup flawless. Her confidence restored by $50,000 already in her account and millions more coming. You really went all out, she said, sliding into the cabana with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Of course, Len replied, pouring tea with steady hands. We deserve this, 8. After everything. The jasmine scent filled the air, sweet, familiar, laced with condensed milk, just like their mother made on Sundays after church when they dream of impossible futures. Rena sipped, eyes closing. It tastes just like home, exactly like Mama's. Len smiled. I made it with the same proportions. 3 parts tea, 1 part milk, 2 spoons of sugar. From memory. It was a lie. The proportions were exact. But the tea was Dubai tap water, boiled in the villa's kitchen, mixed with jasmine bags from Carrefour. The ketamine, however, was very real. She'd stolen it 3 nights earlier from Faisal's private medical cabinet, hidden behind a false panel that opened when you pressed the 7 pillars of wisdom on his shelf. A book he'd never read but kept for appearances. The vial, ketamine 50 milligrams per milliliter, for Zaid al-Harbi, severe spasticity management. Prescribed by a neurologist charging AED 3,500 per consultation. Dispensed by a clinic answering only to the al-Harbi name. Licensed, legal, documented. Untraceable because who would suspect a devoted mother weaponizing her son's medication? 1.2 milliliters mixed into 240 milliliters of tea, enough to induce rapid paralysis and dissociative sedation within 90 seconds. Not enough to stop the heart immediately, but enough to render the body helpless while the mind remained terrifyingly aware. Punishment, not a mercy. Rena took a second sip, then a third, relaxing into the silk cushions. She was mid-sentence. I think we can trust each other now, Len. Really trust each other. When her voice slurred, her eyes widened. Her hand trembled, spilling tea onto the cushion like a bloodstain. "What?" she whispered, panic rising. Her tongue felt thick. Her fingers wouldn't close. Len caught her before she fell, cradling her like when Rena was 7 with nightmares. "Shoo, 8. Just rest." Rena tried to speak, to scream, to fight, but her limbs wouldn't obey. Her lungs worked, her heart beat, but her body was no longer hers. She was a prisoner in her own flesh. She could only watch as Len's face, once soft with sisterly love, hardened into something cold and final. "I loved you," Len said quietly, voice steady as a surgeon's incision. "Even when you didn't deserve it. When you stole from me in grade 6. When you lied to Mama. When you slept with every boy I dated. I forgave it all. Because you were my sister. Because blood was supposed to mean something." She brushed hair from Rena's face with terrible gentleness. "But you chose him over me. Over Zaid. Over us. You saw that beautiful, broken boy as leverage. As a weapon. That's when you stopped being my sister." Tears welled in Rena's eyes, not from the drug, but regret. Too late. "I'm sorry," she tried to say, but only a whisper emerged. "I know," Len said. "I know you're sorry now." Len carried her to the pier's edge. Her nursing training made supporting dead weight easy. The water below was dark, restless, hungry. From her pocket, Len pulled the suicide note. Written 3 days ago, practiced until the script looked unstable, emotional. Written on Burj Al Arab stationery. Smudged with salt water and a drop of her own blood. "I betrayed my sister, the only person who ever loved me. I don't deserve to live. Forgive me, Len." She tucked it into Rena's palm, curling the fingers around it, pressing the paper so it would leave impressions. Then, with one smooth motion, practiced in her mind 100 times, she eased her sister into the sea. No splash, no cry, just quiet surrender. The tide took her instantly, pulling her beneath the surface, away from the lights, away from the world that would forget her within a news cycle. Len watched for 3 minutes, counting like she'd counted when Faisal drowned, ensuring the body drifted toward the eastern breakwater where it would be found quickly but not too quickly. Then she walked back to shore and called the police at 8:51 p.m. "My sister," she sobbed, her voice breaking with manufactured grief that sounded real because part of it was. She jumped. She left a note. "Please." A Marina patrol boat spotted the body near the eastern breakwater. Face down, arms outstretched like a crucifixion. The Cartier bracelet still gleaming because corpses don't remove jewelry. By 4:37 a.m., Dubai police recovered her. By 5:15 a.m., they found the note. By 6 a.m., probable suicide, emotional distress, no foul play suspected. No autopsy. Not for a 22-year-old Filipina domestic worker with no family except the sister who'd reported her missing. No representation. No one to demand answers. In Dubai's hierarchy of human worth, Rena Abelana ranked just above cleaning staff and far below the grieving widow with a $120 million trust fund. Justice operated on a sliding scale determined by passport color and bank balance. Len was interviewed at 9 a.m. in the villa's living room, wrapped in cashmere, eyes red but composed. She couldn't live with what she'd done, Len told the 2 officers. One Emirati, one Egyptian, both taking notes without eye contact. She confessed last night how she'd lied, manipulated, worked with my husband behind my back. She said she felt like a monster. She dabbed her eyes. I told her I forgave her, but she said forgiveness wasn't enough, that Mama would be ashamed. And then she just walked to the edge. Her voice broke. Perfect timing. One officer nodded sympathetically. The other scribbled notes. Neither asked for the reservation details. Neither requested security footage. Neither questioned why a suicide victim would wear a $32,000 bracelet or drink tea at midnight. Because in Dubai, truth isn't uncovered. It's assigned based on who has the most to lose. And Len had assigned it perfectly. The systemic erasure began immediately. Rena's passport confiscated. Standard procedure for deceased domestic staff. Visa canceled the same day. Philippine consulate notified 72 hours later. Personal belongings boxed, labeled unclaimed, Abelana, R. No obituary. No memorial beyond Filipino expat Facebook groups. No repatriation until Len generously covered AD 18,000 for cremation and transport. Another act of sisterly devotion for the records. Back at the villa, Zaid sat on his therapy mat, tapping his drum. Tap, 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 tap. Mama is here. Len knelt beside him, kissed his forehead, breathed in his coconut shampoo. We're safe now, Anik, she whispered in forbidden Tagalog. Nobody can hurt us anymore. He looked up, eyes clear, trusting, full of love that knew nothing of drownings or ketamine or betrayal, and smiled. He didn't know his mama had just drowned his aunt in the same water where his father died. He didn't need to. That evening, Len met with Faisal's estate lawyer to finalize the trust transfer. The court is satisfied with your guardianship, he said, sliding leather folders across the desk. Zaid's welfare is secure. Your financial future is quite comfortable. Len signed without reading. She already knew every clause by heart. Later, alone in her unlocked room, she opened the drawer with her most private things. Zaid's first drawing, 2 stick figures labeled Zaid and Mama, her nursing license, laminated and fading. 2 unused round-trip tickets, Manila, Dubai, purchased before the wedding. For you and me 8. We'll go home together after the ceremony. They never did. She ran her fingers over the paper, imagining a life where she and Rena boarded that plane as sisters returning home victorious, escaping Dubai's golden cage with enough money for their mother, for a small business, for a life without scrubbing toilets. But that life was gone, buried under water and lies. And in its place stood a woman who had learned the hardest lesson. In Dubai, love doesn't save you. Power does. The aftermath. Dubai doesn't forgive. It doesn't forget. But it does move on, swiftly, silently, like sand shifting over graves. 6 months after Rena Abelana's body was pulled from the marina, the city had already buried her memory beneath new scandals. A Russian oligarch's divorce. A Bollywood star's tax case. A cryptocurrency fraud that vaporized $200 million overnight. The police file was archived. Case 2024. DM 0847. Closed, suicide. No further investigation required. The villa staff who once whispered about the cursed sisters now spoke only of bonuses and visa renewals. Memory was dangerous. Forgetting was survival. But in a modest villa in Al Bursha, not the Palm Mansion, which Len sold for $42 million, Elena Len Abelana still wakes at 3:12 a.m. every night. Not from guilt, not from fear, but from habit. That's the hour the divers found Rena. And that's the hour Len checks the CCTV, even though this villa only has 4 cameras, no staff wing, just her and Zaid and the part-time therapist who comes 3 mornings a week. The villa is modest by Al Harbi standards. 3 bedrooms. Real grass instead of artificial turf. Sampaguita flowers that refuse to bloom in desert heat, but Len keeps trying because they smell like home. No gold faucets. No chandeliers. No electronic locks. Just Len, Zaid, and the ghosts they carry. Zaid is thriving in ways doctors said were impossible. At 10, he walks with a Swiss orthotic brace that cost AD 67,000. He speaks in short, deliberate sentences that sound like poetry. He laughs, deep belly laughs. When Len sings Tagalog lullabies while making breakfast, his hands helping crack eggs even though it takes 5 minutes per egg and shells end up everywhere. Mama, he says every time she enters his room. Every single time like a prayer. Not Len. Not nurse. Mama, the word she killed for. Twice. The only one that still makes her feel human instead of monster. She's applying for Filipino adoption through the Philippine Embassy. 47 pages of documentation submitted 4 months ago. But the paperwork keeps getting delayed. The most recent email from Ms. Socorro Bernardo. We require notarized consent from all biological maternal relatives. Our records indicate Rena Abelana, deceased, as next of kin. Please submit affidavit from surviving sibling or application will be closed. Len submitted it 3 times. Each time, incomplete, legal conflict of interest. Because a sister who drowned herself can't give consent, and a sister who pushed her can't be trusted to speak for her. Someone in that embassy suspects. They can't prove it, but they can make her life difficult with paperwork, ensuring she never forgets that in their eyes, she's not just a mother, she's a question mark. In her bedroom drawer lie two things she can't burn. 2 unused tickets. Manila, Dubai, April 21st, 2024. For you and me 8. We'll go home together. They never did. And a screenshot of Rena's last text, sent at 8:47 p.m., 47 seconds before ketamine paralyzed her completely. Len, I'm sorry. I was scared. He said he'd deport me if I didn't. I love you. I'm sorry. Len has read it 4,000 times according to her phone's metadata. The words rearrange themselves depending on the hour, the mood, the depth of her insomnia. Was it regret? A plea? A lie? Or just the drug making her sister say what Len needed to hear to live with what she'd done? She'll never know. And that uncertainty is its own punishment. Every night after Zaid sleeps, Len sits in the small security room, barely a closet, reviewing feeds from 4 cameras. Front door, garden, hallway, kitchen. Not for intruders. For Rena. Sometimes at 3:12 a.m., a shadow flickers near the guest room, the one Len keeps made with fresh sheets, just in case. She rewinds, pauses, zooms in until pixels break apart. It's never her. Just light, wind, the stray orange tabby that wandered in 3 weeks ago and sleeps on that bed because Len feeds it, because it looked at her the way Rena used to. Hungry, hopeful, willing to love whoever fed it. But Len watches anyway, because if Rena's ghost ever appears, Len wants to be ready to say what she never could while holding her sister's paralyzed body. I loved you. Until the very end. Even when you betrayed me. I loved you. And I'm sorry. But the cameras show only empty hallways and shadows that aren't ghosts. Just absence. She still keeps Faisal's medical files. Not from sentiment, but strategy. His panic response to water. His undisclosed arrhythmia. His unused beta blocker prescriptions. She reads them sometimes late at night with clinical detachment. A perfect kill. No trace. No witness. But then she looks at Zaid sleeping across the hall, and the word kill tastes like ash. Because he's not a monster. He's a child. And she's not a murderer. She's his mother. Except she is both. This is the paradox of Len Abelana. Saint and sinner. Victim and executioner. Mother and murderer. And in a city where 250,000 Filipina domestic workers live under the kafala system. Passports held hostage, lives dependent on employers' whims, women disappearing into detention for reporting rape because sex outside marriage is criminal even when it's not consensual. Her story isn't an anomaly. It's a warning. How many accidental drownings were really survival disguised as tragedy? How many suicides were staged by women with no other way out? How many silent screams have been swallowed by desert wind? Len didn't choose violence because she wanted to. She chose it because the system gave her no other language for justice. No court would believe a Filipina nurse over an oil heir. No consulate would protect a domestic worker from billionaire threats. No law would save her from erasure. Passport confiscated, visa canceled, body shipped home marked unclaimed, along with the boy who called her mama. So she used the only power she had, precision, medical knowledge, the art of silent death. The same precision that kept Zaid alive for 5 years now kept her free. But freedom has a price Len pays in endless installments. She can never return to the Philippines, not without risking extradition if Dubai reopens the case. She can never trust another soul. She can never sleep without checking cameras, without waking at 3:12 a.m. to shadows that are just guilt taking shape. Yet when Zaid hugs her in the morning, whispering, "Good morning, Mama," with breath that smells like toothpaste and innocence, she knows with absolute certainty, it was worth it. Every death, every lie, every shadow she chases. Because he's safe. He's loved. He's hers. Narrator. She didn't kill for money. She killed for a child who called her mama. In a city built on sand, love was the only thing that couldn't be bought. and the only thing worth dying for, or killing for. In a world where women like Len are disposable, where their labor builds empires but their lives don't matter, her revenge wasn't just personal. It was survival. And in the silence after the splash, in the empty space where her sister stood, Len didn't find peace. She found purpose. Because sometimes, the only way to save a life is to end another. Sometimes, the only way to be a mother is to become a monster. And sometimes, the only justice available to the powerless is the justice they take with their own hands. Call to action. Was Len a victim or a villain? Could you have done the same? Drop your thoughts below. This conversation matters. Because these stories exist because systems fail. Because justice is a commodity. Because some people are invisible until they do something unforgivable. Hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell. Next week, The Nanny's Secret. A Dubai nanny discovers her employer's son is her child, stolen at birth. When she tries to reclaim him, the CEO is found dead with a syringe in his arm. Some truths are worth killing for. Thanks for watching Crime V. Stay sharp, stay safe, and never trust a perfect life. It's usually hiding the darkest secrets.